Welcome everybody. We got a seminar today, a webinar, Control of Common Weeds, really focusing on southern turf grasses. I'm Bert McCarty. I'm a professor of turfgrass science at Clemson University, located in Clemson, South Carolina. So let's get started. Weed management is a many-facet avenue. You got to know what you're dealing with, so you got to have proper weed ID. You hopefully can prevent its introduction, and of course, following proper turfgrass management and our cultural practices is a big key. And then, if necessary, the proper selection, use, and application of herbicides, if that comes to that. A couple commercials here. I'm always asked about a good weed identification guide. Here's one. Of course, I'm gonna recommend it since I wrote it, but it's called Common Weeds and Wildflowers, the second edition. It just came out this year. Had over 400 weeds, 1,000 color photographs, complete description of weeds, etc. This can be ordered through Amazon.com, and there's an ISBN number located on the screen. Again, widely popular publication. I really put a lot of emphasis on having very nice color photographs and very applicable descriptions. So here's one potential weed identification guide. Also, I came out with one this year called Characteristics of Herbicides for Turf, Ornamentals, Landscapes, and Aquatics. Well, what is this? Well, this goes through all the herbicides are labeled for these particular markets. It goes into their modes of action, the way they're classified, how do you use these safely and properly in various turf grass and other commodities, and then how do you use this book when you're trying to combat herbicide resistance. Again, this is another Amazon publication. You see the link here. This one's $10. Again, another very popular publication. And for those who are going down to the Caribbean or other areas, tropical areas, a good buddy of mine wrote this one earlier this year called Plants of the Caribbean and Other Tropical Areas. So if you get down there and want to know what that plant is, here's a good reference for being able to determine that. Again, another Amazon publication. You can see the address here and the ISBN number. All right, again, growing good turf. That is really the cornerstone of trying to prevent pest invasion, including weeds. Well, how do you do that? Well, again, I would say about 70% of turfgrass weed control involves good cultural practices. Of course, this involves in choosing a well-adapted grass for your particular area. Of course, establishing it in a proper manner. And then, most importantly, manage that turf in terms of mowing, fertilizer, watering, etc., to hopefully create a dense, weed-free or weed-resistant turf grass. And here's an example showing when it's not managed well. Here's tall fescue, and it's at various mowing heights, as you can see down at the bottom, from 1 inch to 4 inch. And then the tall red bars indicate how much crabgrass has invaded. So at 1 inch mowing height, here you've got almost 80% crabgrass, and less than or 20% tall fescue. Go to 2 inches, that doesn't budge much, about 75% crabgrass. Go to 3 inches, you're right at 30% crabgrass. If you get to where you really need to be mowing tall fescue at 4 inches, you got almost 0% crabgrass. Again, the fescue at these higher heights is able to shade the turf and shade the soil, and crabgrass seed needs for maximum germination needs sunlight. And so here you're just providing competitive turf, not only prevents physical invasion, but also prevents sunlight from penetrating the soil. All right, another reference along this line on how to maintain turf. I would say a complete guide would be on the left called Southern Lawns, more of a homeowner manager type publications on the right. Again, these are two references on how to maintain yards in the South. And so it goes into everything I can think of. And so here's how you could get these publications through Clemson University and their publication numbers. And then lastly, our pest control recommendations. Most land-grant universities have pest control recommendations for various commodities. Here's the website for ours. It's free. Here's the book form of that. It goes into all the pests, including weeds, but insects, diseases, nematodes, other pest-related topics that might be of interest. So again, here's the web link for that. You could download any or all of those particular topics. All right, let's talk about some new things that's occurring in the lawn care business. I'd like to try to keep everybody up to news on new things that are coming out that have or soon will be coming out. First one is glyphosate tolerant turf grasses are here. The Scott's company have developed or has developed this line of glyphosate tolerant turf grasses. They're marketing this as Pro Vista. For those who have not heard about it, initially they have released St. Augustine grass and Kentucky bluegrass with this herbicide resistant gene in it. Interesting enough, they also inserted a gibberellic acid regulatory gene or regulating gene. And what gibberellic acid does is, among many other things in the plant, it helps control cell elongation. So this regulatory gene will prevent so much extension of those cells, and therefore you got a much shorter dwarf plant. Currently, this is only sold as sod and not as seed. But again, the Pro Vista line of glyphosate tolerant turf grasses is available. Here's just a picture of the Kentucky bluegrass up on the left. The pot on the left with the real tall growing Kentucky bluegrass does not have the GA or gibberellic acid inhibiting gene, while the pot right beside it, which kind of looks like it's been mowed, but it has not. That's what happens when you put the gene in plant. The plant will get to a certain height and just stop growing up. And so not only saves on mowing, but then, of course, clippings and yard waste that you got to dispose of. Lower right, same type thing with St. Augustine grass. Obviously, the pot on the left has not had the GA inhibiting or regulatory gene inserted into the plant, while the one on the right, again, just like the bluegrass, it grows to a certain height and then it stops. So again, a very labor saving device with this gene. And then to the glyphosate tolerance. Here's again a St. Augustine grass. On the right is Raleigh St. Augustine grass plug. It's been treated with Roundup or glyphosate. Obviously, you can tell not very tolerant to that, while the plug on the left has had this gene inserted. And so you see the complete tolerance of that. So this technology is available. Now, something kind of on the same line, but it's certainly new to the turf business, is the bringing to market of a herbicide safener called Recognition. This has been developed by the Syngenta Chemical Corporation. Recognition is actually a combination of mecamethrin, which is actually the herbicide safener, plus trifloxysulfuron, which, as you may know, is the common name for the trade name Monument. And so Recognition is going to be a tank mix partner of these two products. It is going to be predominantly for St. Augustine grass and zoysia grass. It allows a higher rate of monument if you wish to use that than what normally can be used on St. Augustine grass. Can also add things like terflunomine, should be terflunomine here at 16 ounces per acre, and have complete safety on these two turf grasses. The company tells me they should have this available in the spring of 2023. Now, probably what's more exciting, at least to me, is you can add high rates of fusilade in with this Recognition and get complete safety by St. Augustine grass and zoysia grass. You can put the fusilade rate up to the maximum herbicide label rate, which is 24 ounces per acre, with complete safety. And to do this on either one of these turf grass previously has been unheard of. The one negative of using the Recognition is it also safens crabgrass. And so even though it will control most grassy weeds, crabgrass will be an exception. So you still have to plan for that. Well, here's just one of my research trials showing some plots we had this past year. Here's an overview of the plots. Obviously, you can just tell what the herbicide safener is or is not. On the left here is untreated and St. Augustine grass, while the Recognition plus Fusilade at 12 ounces is on the right. And you see very little discoloration or damage to the St. Augustine with the Fusilade. Here we're going up to 24 ounces on, 18 ounces on the left of the Fusilade with a recognition, and 24 ounces on the right. Normally 24 ounces would just fry or kill the St. Augustine grass, and I'll show you that in just a second. But to have this level of safety is just unheard of, so it's pretty exciting. Again, here is recognition on the left at 18 ounces. On the right is a Fusilade alone at 18 ounces. And you see the severe damage that the St. Augustine is experiencing with this high rate of Fusilade. Also, some other things that recognition probably will be eventually tank mixed with. Another herbicide, quinclorac, which is commonly known as Drive. Again, got a little drift here on the left, but Drive at a half pound active per acres, which is the high rate. Again, are certainly a high rate. Complete safety to the St. Augustine grass. Here's a recognition in the middle with additional monument. So you got a 2x rate of monument, again with complete safety on the St. Augustine grass. And then here's terfalonamine on the right at 1 quart per acre. Had some clover in this trial, so with the browning you see is some of that clover dying out. But again, very good tolerance by the St. Augustine grass. So good technology, exciting technology for those who have certain St. Augustine grass as well as zoysia grass. I think this is going to be a real good, almost a game changer type situation for you folks. So be on the lookout for more information as the fall and winter comes and goes, and then hopefully this will be available sometime next spring. Also, again, zoysia grass, just like St. Augustine grass, complete safety, even at some extremely high rates of the Fusilade as well as terfalone ester. What the picture is trying to show you on the foreground is a trial where I had raw zoysia grass with some of these same treatments I had on St. Augustine, complete safety. Behind that, or the background of this particular picture, that's common Bermuda grass with the same identical rate, same identical times. So you see almost complete death, or certainly severe death, or control, I should say, to the common Bermuda grass, while the zoysia grass has not had any discoloration. Okay, on from there, there's some new products that have come out with some old chemistry. The old chemistry has gone off patent, so you're starting to see some other generics come out. AMVAC Environmental Products has several formulations of sulfentrazone. Sulfentrazone by itself, they call it SurePick. Combined with imazaquine, they call it SurePick IQ. And then with halosulfuron, it's called SurePick Halo. Here's some more information about these particular products. Again, if you've used sulfentrazone, imazaquine, and halosulfuron in the past, expect similar results with these products. Again, just another generic formulation of these. Another pre-tank mix combination that's available is called Coastal from the SIPCAM Agro Corporation. What is Coastal? Coastal is our three-way mix of prodiamine or barricade, imazaquine or our image, and then simazine or Princep. And so this is used on warm season grasses, as you see in the second bullet here. Again, what does this provide? It provides a broad spectrum pre and post-emergent control of various broadleaves and grassy weeds. And so this has really been introduced to help combat resistance that we're starting to see in the turfgrass world to certain weeds. And again, this has been out for 2 years now. Been a very successful for poa annua control. Poa annua has widespread herbicide resistance. What we have here are 3 combinations, or I should say a combination of 3 products with different modes of action, and therefore that's the best way to go after these herbicide resistant weeds. So Coastal. Here's just some my research plots again. Top plots just showing a combination. I put together a Spectacle, Celsius, and Princep. These were put out in November, and these photographs were taken the first week in March of the following year. So extra control not only poa but various broadleaf weeds. The trial or the plot below that is Spectacle, Tribute Total, and Princep. Using Tribute Total instead of Celsius. Either way, though, we had very good results in terms of weed control. Here's Spectacle up top with Spectacle with Tribute Total and Princep. With 2 applications, really probably didn't need to. The 1 application in November did just as well. And then at the bottom we had barricade or prodiamine monument and Princep. Again, a good 3-way combination that provided excellent weed control. And then lastly, the coastal product. Again, coastal's a combination of prodiamine, mazaquin, and simazine applied in November. Then the plot pictures taken in March. And you can see the control we got compared to the untreated in the lower picture. So very dramatic, very good product, something to consider. All right, some other generic products that are out now. Right Line has one called Sulfin Core. If you haven't heard of it, Sulfin Core is what is it? It's a combination of sulfentrazone and then metribuzin or Syncor. And so this is a pre-tank mix combination. Again, it's only for Bermuda grass, all turf sites as well as IVM markets. And again, what would this get? Well, same things you would expect sulfentrazone and metribuzin to get by themselves. But this synergism occurs when you tank mix them. So you get post-grassy weed control like goosegrass, various sedges and kalingas, and then some broadleaf weeds. So again, Sulfin-Core by Right Line. Here's just one trial on a ball field where we've taken out goosegrass with the product. Again, this is on Bermuda grass, and you see the close-up picture on the right showing the close-up of the goosegrass and as it is done. All right, another Right Line combination products, mazethapyr and sulfentrazone. Sulfentrazone, again, you're familiar with. Mazethapyr, that is a old row crop herbicide used for purple nut sedge control. And so with that combination, you can use these on warm season grasses except St. Augustine and seashore paspalum. Again, all turf sites, including home yards. Here's the rates. And again, this is going to be a little stronger on purple nut sedge. And so sedges, kalinga, broadleaf weed control, and some grassy weed suppression. But here, the main weeds you're going after are certainly purple nut sedge and some broadleaf weeds. So these Sulfin Southern. All right. Need to talk about a bad thing because it is a real occurrence, and that's herbicide resistance. And no, it's not just something we're making up. It is something that is still semi-located, localized, but it is spreading rapidly. So, what is herbicide resistance? That's when, of course, you use a particular herbicide or a similar mode of actions continuously, generally for 10 to 15 years, and then you start seeing certain weeds that normally have been controlled not being controlled. And this is what it looks like. This is with herbicide resistant and susceptible poana. You get kind of this polka dot effect where you have certain plants which obviously are still susceptible dying out, as you can see here, yellowing out and turning brown, while plants right next to it haven't been touched. And so that is very indicative if you got herbicide resistance starting to show up. Here it is with glyphosate. So in this particular situation, glyphosate has been used for at least 12 consecutive years. Again, you see some biotypes of in this case, again, annual bluegrass or poana, which have yellowed out and browned out, which obviously are being controlled, while right next to it, you've got plants that are not phased. And so, again, this herbicide resistance is very serious, and it is really starting to march across many states, especially in the South. And so, something to be aware of. Again, just for a little review on this herbicide resistance, again, the herbicides don't cause genetic changes within plants that then causes resistance. What happens is the genes for resistance already occurs out there in the wild population. So what you're doing with the herbicides is just taking out the ones that are not resistance, leaving the biotypes that are resistance, and then eventually they become the dominant biotype present. And so, as Charles Darwin said many years ago, this is the natural selection, or as he called it, survival of the fittest. And so the plants is able to adapt to what's been thrown at it. And so by using this same mode of action consecutively for a number of years, again, we're starting to see this resistance build up. Now, this has happened in row crops for the last 20 years, so it's just now starting to happen in turf. But again, once you get it, it's tough to overcome. So the best thing as far as resistant management is try to avoid it, or at least delay it. And what this really involves is implementing a rotation of herbicides with different modes of actions, or probably what's more common is a combination of herbicides with different modes of action. And that tends to be the best way to go after these herbicide resistant weeds. So by using a combination of products like the coastal and other products I mentioned, again, you got different modes of action. Even though some biotypes might be resistant to one of those mode of action, probably is not resistant to all three modes of action. And so you go ahead and still get pretty good control. So again, it does take a little bit of knowledge on the herbicides and their mode of actions. Back to that publication on the characteristics of herbicides used in these specialty markets. It goes through all these modes of actions, what to expect if you use these herbicides, and how plants typically react to it. So might be, again, a good reference tool for you. But resistance is very real. That's what I'm trying to really emphasize. Also, the herbicides are not causing genetic changes within the plant. Those resistant genes are out there. It just takes a while for those herbicides to be used consecutively to take out the ones that are susceptible, leaving the resistant biotype to dominate the population. So again, knowing the mode of actions, again, you don't have to know it's very detailed scientific terms on the mode of actions. You can just look at what this group of herbicides mode of action is, or site of action. This chart is just an example. The SOA is really the site of action, and you just see the letters here. And that's all you really need to know. And so understand that, for example, in the ALS group or herbicides, the yellow group up top, these are very commonly used herbicides. Most of these are post-emergent herbicides. And so all these have the same site or mode of action. And so, if you use Monument for a number of years and you say, all right, I need to switch herbicides because I don't want to do like Dr. McCarty says and have herbicide resistance. And so you go from Monument to Certainty, for example. Well, you're not really doing anything in terms of preventing that resistance because they all have the same mode of action. Both of these have the same mode of action. They're what we call ALS inhibitors. So you would need to go to another one of these groups, color groups, for example, if you're trying to control the weed with something else with a different mode of action. So again, it sounds probably more complicated than what it really is. Again, go back that publication, either you can buy through Amazon or through our pest control guide, and it has all these products listed in the sites of actions and the groups that have the same site of action, groups of herbicides with the same sites of action. And so it makes it easier to just pick and choose. Just got to understand that, just because you go from one herbicide to another, you got to make sure they don't have the same site of action. For example, here's a annual bluegrass, a poana. That's the weed you see here. Is resistant to what we call the ALS inhibitors. And these ALS inhibitors in this particular trial included Revolver and Monument, as shown on the two right strips. Again, you see the annual bluegrass has good resistance to these herbicides. While on the left strip, we've gone to a mitotic inhibitor, a herbicide called Curb. And Curb had never been used on this particular site before. And you can see how there's no resistance to that particular herbicide. So in this case, you're rotating to a different site of mode of action, and you happen to delay that resistance from occurring. Here's another example of the annual bluegrass. On the right, against the ALS inhibiting resistant annual bluegrass biotype. Well, then in the middle, the product called Poacure has a totally different mode of action than the ALS inhibitors. And so this particular herbicide, the Poacure, had never been used on this particular site. And you can see how the poor plants were totally controlled by it because they've never been used before. Just kind of an overhead shot, similar type thing. Here's a facility that has sulfonylurea resistant poa on the left side of that blue line. That those green spots are annual bluegrass that are resistant to a sulfonylurea herbicide. In this case, Revolver and Monument. On the right side of the blue line, the manager of the turf decided to switch to curb, which again has a totally different mode of action than the sulfonylurea herbicides. And you see, you got total control, complete control of those of those plants. And so again, rotating different herbicides with different modes of action. All right, let's talk about specific weed control. Since we're coming up on winter, I'll focus on that to begin with. Again, a couple of this do's and don'ts when you're dealing with winter weeds. I know it's frustrating because you don't get the calls from potential customers till early to mid March. By then, it's almost too late to go after a lot of these weeds because they mature, they produce flowers, they produce seeds, and so they're just a lot harder to control. Try to control the weeds when they're small. Right now, for most of us, the weeds have or soon will be germinating. Trying to controlling these between now and say December is the best time to go after them. Once the days start to get a little longer in length, after of course end of December, these weeds start to mature and tiller out, and they just get to be much more difficult to control. So again, that would be the first take-home message if you have that flexibility. All right, remember that tough winter animal weeds is shown here, or as some example, like henbit and purple dead nettle and corn speedwell. You got to have tank mix. It's just rarely that one herbicide by itself could give you satisfactory control, especially if you have a mixture of these weeds on a particular site. And so, we like the tank mix, especially broadleaf herbicides, and that's the reason why we just got a very diverse set of broadleaf weeds. It takes a tank mixture to be able to control all of these with one application. Now, here's a concoction that I developed about 15 or 20 years ago that has been very successful on centipede, St. Augustine, Georgia, and dormant or semi-dormant Bermuda grass. A lot of times it's called a Clemson concoction. And it's really targeting broadleaf weed controls as well as annual bluegrass, a poa annua. And what does this involve? Well, it involves 2 or 3 or 4 different modes of action of herbicides combined at once. I would say the base combination would be either simazine or atrazine, a quart per acre, at a light rate of 2,4-D at 4 ounces per acre. Again, this is a quarter rate. Normally you're using 2,4-D at 16 ounces. But at 4 ounces, these turf grasses have very good tolerance. And then a sulfentrazone product, such as Dismiss or the Sure Pick that I mentioned earlier. Again, very low rates, 4 ounces per acre. Now, to this three-way mix, add at least one more. If you're trying to go after wild onions, wild garlic, dandelions, spurges, annual blue-eye grass, then you might want to tank mix in MSM, Blade, or Mano, which are all metsulfuron. And again, at very low rates, quarter ounce per acre. Now, if you have more leguminous type weeds like clover, vetch, for example, chamber bitter or philanthus, then you might want to tank mix in phylloxipir. Here I have a Spotlight, 11 ounces per acre, again, a pretty light rate. Or if you just want a general catch-all product, you just use dicamba or Banville, 4 ounces of the 4L formulation. So this 3, 4, maybe 5-way combination has been very successful, very safe on all these grasses. Again, try to go after these weeds probably in February. For most of us, we really optimum time, January or February. Again, a couple of things. Don't use these on in the heated summer on these turf grasses. You may ding them up a little bit. Again, the best times go after them in the fall for these winter broadleaf weeds. And again, you add up the cost, it's around $8 to $10 an acre. And so for the cost, for the efficacy, for the turf safety, this combination is hard to beat. But it does take some mixing and matching of herbicides. And some people don't mind doing that. Some companies or people don't want to do that. So let's look at some other options. One picture here is showing putting this out on various broadleaf weeds within that blue rectangle. Has been treated. The muddy grass is starting to green up. Got very good weed control compared to the non-treated on the outside of that blue box. All right, let's go after some specific weeds. I know that's what a lot of people want to know about. All right, let's go after some of these cool season perennials like wild garlic or wild onion. Here's how you tell the difference between these two. Wild garlic leaves are hollow. Wild garlic, wild onion, I'm sorry, leaves are not. They're solid. So there are other ways to tell them apart, but that's certainly an easy way to do it. Spring star flower, another ornamental that has escaped into the turf world. A lot of times it's kind of a cool season perennial. Even though it does hang around year round, you certainly see it mostly in the winter and early spring. Again, it does have these underground bubblets as shown in the lower right. And again, you'll be able to tell it from some other weeds that look similar. This spring star flower emits an onion-like odor when you crush the leaves. And so that's a pretty easy way to tell it apart from some other ones, such as Star Bethlehem. Star Bethlehem looks pretty similar. It doesn't tend to have a bluish strip underneath the flowers. It tends to be more green. All parts of this plant are poisonous, so obviously you want to stay away from chewing down on this. But it doesn't have that onion smell like the spring star flower. So how do you control these? Well, I would suggest a combination of Quicksilver, which contains carfentrazone. That'll give you pretty good quick knockdown, and take mix in with that either metsulfuron, which is Manoblade or MSM, or Monument. Now, the metsulfuron is going to be a lot cheaper, but if you got some nut sedges you need to also control, then Monument might be a product of choice. This combination has been very successful. Again, the Quicksilver burns down those leaves, while the Manor or blade of MSM or Monument gets to those bubblets and gives you residual control. Now, in cool season grasses, I'm not going to go much into that, but here are some 2 and 3-way broadleaf mixtures which have worked very well. Again, these don't control the bubblets as well as the Monument or the metsulfuron above, so it may take 2 years to get complete control. So understand that in cool season grasses, obviously you can't use metsulfuron, you cannot use Monument, so you have to use other herbicides, which do a good job of burning down the leaves, but don't get to those bubblets. So it requires a couple of years to get them complete control. And here's, again, one of my many research trials showing the metsulfuron, again, trade name Manor, Blade, MSM. I guess it's generic. There are other ones out there. Here I put it on dormant Bermuda grass, a half ounce per acre, and this is 270 days after treatment. So this isn't that particular year, but this is the following year. So you can see how the herbicide translocated down, got those bubblets, and you're getting long-term residual control. So that's obviously what you want. All right, chamber bitter. There's several different chamber bitter or Phyllanthus species that occur in turf. These typically move around with container ornamentals. One of the characteristics of the chamber bitter that makes it tough to control, the seeds generally are located, as you can see in the lower right-hand picture, underneath the stems and leaves. And so even if you get a herbicides that burn down the leaves, a lot of times those seeds will just drop right down to the ground and voila. That's how you perpetuate the species or regenerate it. And so that unique characteristics by the plant gives it an advantage to be able to withstand a lot of our herbicide applications. Again, here's another one called Longstalk Phyllanthus on that picture. I'm always asked about pre-emergent control. Well, if you get a true pre-emergent situation where none of the plants have germinated, then Ron Starr or Gallery do a pretty good job. Now, that's best if you're in like a container ornamentals where you might be potting up plants and then you are starting from ground zero. But in turf, if you had Phyllanthus last year, you may have it again this year and it's already germinated. It might have just been burned down with frost. So that's something you got to determine. But pre-emergent control, Ronstar, Gallery are two best products. As far as post-emergent control, something containing Phylloxipir is your best bet. Here's a list of various products that have Phylloxipir in them. There may be others out there, but here's a list I know of. And again, Phylloxipir has just been shown to be almost foolproof on controlling the various Phyllanthus or chamber bitter type weeds. And so you can pick and choose between these products or use Phylloxipir or Spotlight by itself. So that is what I would recommend for various Phyllanthus products or weeds. Again, here's some other options. Again, if you wish, three-way type combinations of 2,4-D, MCPP, dicamba, it'll work, but it's going to take at least a couple of applications. Again, atrazine or simazine, again, with 2 applications, probably get pretty good control. The metsulfuron, I don't know. Sometimes I get very good control. Sometimes I don't. But I think the bottom line here is consider using something with Phylloxipir in it. I think you have much better results. All right, yellow wood sorrel or oxalis, kind of an interesting weed. It could germinate year-round, could grow year-round. So it's hard to even classify if it's a summer annual, winter annual, or perennial because you can see it almost year-round. But anyway, it is technically a perennial, but again, it can be seen just about year-round. It does spread by rhizomes as well as the seed. It has those ochre-shaped seeds that drop down, and again, the plant regenerates itself. Again, in cool season grasses, something with Phylloxipir and or Triclopyr would be recommended. And here's a bunch of those products that are out there. For warm season grasses, I would say a combination of Phylloxipir plus metsulfuron, the blade, the manor, the MSM. It's about as good as you can get. It does a good job, just like it does with the Phyllanthus, at the metsulfuron rate of 1 ounce per acre. And again, you may need to repeat this because this plant will put down seed that will germinate, but generally 1 application to kill is certainly what's there. And so for warm season turf, that's what I would recommend. Pennywort or dollarweed, there are 4 or 5 of these species floating around. They're all hydrocotyl species. What makes it tough to control is very waxy. It has a very waxy cuticle. So a lot of herbicides that bounce off that wax and never get into the plant. So that makes it a little tougher. Something with atrazine or simazine does a pretty good job, 30 days apart, 2 applications. It is slow, but it will still do a pretty good job. A pre-tank mix called Prompt, which is atrazine plus basagram, also does a good job. Something with mazaquin in it. Trade name Image is mazaquin by itself, or something with a mazaquin in it. That coastal product I mentioned earlier would do a pretty good job on the pennywort or dollarweed. Something with metsulfuron in it. Again, the metsulfuron trade names include Blade, Manor, MSM. There are others. And then you can go to the traditional 2 or 3-way broadleaf mixtures containing 2,4-D dicamba MCPP, but obviously you need to have tolerant turf grasses, and that's not always the case when dealing with pennywort or dollarweed. So these are typically our better choices for pennywort or dollarweed. Also, a bunch of viola species or violets. These are starting to show their heads, even though these mostly are perennials. They're kind of cool season perennials, so they're starting now to regenerate themselves or regrow. Typically, they have a whitish to bluish to purple flower. Probably the most widespread of one of these viola species is called Johnny Jump Up. The Johnny Jump Up is technically a winter annual, while a lot of the species are perennial. So Johnny Jump Up is just now germinating, and for most of us in many of our areas, really won't notice it until probably about January, February, but it's there. And so again, the fall would be the best time to go after it. Again, in warm season grasses, the metsulfuron, again, the Manor, MSM, the Blade, should mention Manson, Mansion is also a trade name, and there are others. Blindside does a good job. Blindside is just a pre-taint mix of metsulfuron and sulfentrazone. And Katana, flazosulfuron. It does a pretty good job on violets. Again, uh, as the weeds mature, it will take multiple applications. If you give them in the fall, generally want to do it. But if you wait again to March, it's going to take 2 applications. Generally, these are 14 to about 21 days apart. Again, the best bet from an IPM point of view is go after these in the fall. Next is Florida Bethany or rattlesnake weed. Another one that moves around a lot of times with container ornamentals, as you can see here. Forest control in centipede, St. Augustine, Georgia, in the fall, application of atrazine, simazine, prompt, manor, blade, mansion, or MSM. Again, in Bermuda grass, Georgia, or fescue, you can go with these particular herbicides and get pretty good control with Florida Bethany. Again, fall application is what you want to go after this particular weed. All right, common Lespedeza is a summer annual, so it's dying out for many of us right now, but it will germinate and come back next spring. It is a legume, so it makes its own nitrogen. As far as control, again, it's just hard to beat a combination or rotation of metsulfuron and spotlight if lots appear. That rotation just does an excellent job on taking out common Lespedeza. And here's just an example of one of my research trials. Again, this is with spotlight at a pint per acre. This is Lespedeza control in centipede grass. And again, as you can tell in the 4 rectangular dots, orange dots here, just excellent control. All right, burnweed, another summer annual, one that's really gotten bad in the last 15 and 20 years. Again, it's pretty easy to control if you just get after it. And here's Spectacle as a pre-emergent, 4.5 ounces per acre. This was applied in March, and then this particular picture was taken in June. So you see excellent control. Celsius, again, this particular application is a post-emergent herbicide, so it's applied in June. And this is 56 days after the treatment, so we're still getting excellent control of the burnweed. Simazine, again, applied in March when the mutagrass are still dormant. This picture taken in June, still excellent control. As well as a combination of a pre-emergent herbicide, a pendulum, as well as with tower. Again, put out in March, picture taken in June. You can see the excellent control we're getting compared to the untreated surrounding that particular trial. And then blindside, again, as a post-emergent herbicide, excellent control. This is 56 days after treatment. No turf issues, and again, very good control. Oh, and one more, tribute total. Again, just like the blindside, this is 56 days after treatment. Again, excellent control, excellent turf tolerance. So, as far as pre-emergent herbicides for grassy weeds next summer, I'm always asked, well, what's the best product? Well, that's a loaded question. What's best for one person may not be best for another. But we're talking about things like crabgrass, doveweed, goosegrass, foxtails. Here's when they typically germinate in the spring, when soil temperatures at these particular plants at 4-inch depths are reached, and then the weed seeds start to germinate. So it does vary. You know, you go from 55 degrees for crabgrass up to 80 degrees for doveweed. Again, we're pretty much herbicides. One of the things I see people have a problem with if they can't water it in or get rainfall within about 7 days after application, they may not work very well. So that is a common reason of failure of pre-emergent herbicides. So just something I want to bring to your attention. Again, if you don't have irrigation, and if you can time it right, obviously before some kind of anticipated rainfall event. Again, if it's not watered in between photo decomposition or breakdown by sunlight and or volatilization may occur, you just won't get as good or as long control. So what's the best pre-emergent herbicide? You know, again, that's a loaded question. As far as there efficacy, this is what I consider after 40 years of doing this. Uh, the expected control on crabgrass and goosegrass, two of our biggest summer annual grassy weeds that we encounter. The E is excellent control, which I could say is at 90% or better. G is good in that 80 to 90% control range. F is kind of means fair, which is in that 70 to 80% control range. And really anything below that, it's not going to make it in the marketplace. It's just not very competitive. So here's what I say most of these products do as far as control. It's kind of interesting. Generally, crabgrass is a little easier to control than goosegrass, and so you see a lot more E's and G's on the crabgrass column. Well, on the goosegrass, you see a lot more F's and G's for fair to good. And so, depending on the weed you're after, here's how I rank their ability to control those weeds. Couple things to think about with these particular herbicides. Again, split applications typically provide better and more consistent crabgrass control than single applications. This second application should be about 60 days after the first. And so we just typically get better control, not only with putting it out prior to germination, obviously, getting them watered in, and then coming back with a split application about 6 days after the first. As far as broadleaf weeds, pre-emergent herbicides, it varies so much. Most of these herbicides really target grassy weeds. Gallery or Soxaben would be an exception. It is targeting mostly broadleaf weeds. I know there's a price to pay for that, literally, but it's going to give you the most consistent pre-emergent control of broadleaf weeds. Some of these other herbicides on some of these weeds do an excellent job. On other broadleaf weeds, they don't do as consistent of a job. So gallery overall would be what I would say is the best, if that's what you're after. Again, here's some reasons why we see failure with pre-emergent herbicides. The rate too low is certainly one. Not getting them activated with water, as I mentioned earlier, is another one. And then not getting it out before the weed germinates or emerge. And so this is another common reason. And here's some other ones, but those are three common reasons I see why sometimes you get inconsistent control with these products. All right, as far as post-emergent grassy weed control and centipede grass, hadn't really changed that much. Cefoxidem or Vantage or Segment, G-Pro, and there are others. It's generic. It's still the product of choice. The other options, but still cefoxidem is probably our best option. And St. Augustine, again, you don't have anything as a post-emergent grassy weed control, especially on mature grassy weeds like crabgrass or goosegrass. But again, this recognition in the future is a potential product of choice to use. And so, I'm really excited about this particular herbicide combination. And so that, I think, in the future is going to help alleviate some of this posted grassy weed control issues we have in St. Augustine grass. In Bermuda grass and the lawn care business, you're really down to one product, and that's quinclorac. It tends to be a little inconsistent. It also can, in the heat of summer, cause some pretty good discoloration to the Bermuda grass. And so if you could use Drive, try to do it in the spring when it's not so hot. You still got good soil moisture and the crabgrass is small. You get a lot better control versus waiting until August when it's hot. Crabgrass is big, it's mature, it's tilled out, it's produced seed heads, and you could probably get some burn to that Bermuda grass. So Drive will work well, but it is a more of a late spring, early summer type product. And so I'm gonna skip through as I'm getting a little time here crunch. As far as doveweed, I would like to mention that. Doveweed, again, as I mentioned earlier, doesn't really germinate until soil temperatures at 4-inch level hit about 80 degrees. In South Carolina, for example, that generally occurs about the first or second week in May. So as another comparison, crabgrass, where I live, generally germinates about the last week in March, second to third or fourth week in March. And so you can see the delay in germination of doveweed versus crabgrass in my particular site. And so, as far as control on doveweed, what I suggest you do is wait until you get through that flush of germination. And then I would go after it with a combination of pre and post-emergent herbicides. As far as post-emergent herbicides, we've gotten very good results with Surge, with a combination of 2,4-D and Blindside, and with a granular application or granular formulation of atrazine. And atrazine is slower, but it's certainly cheaper. So that has to be decided by you on whether or not to use that. A lot of times it does take 2 applications. Again, even with the Surge, 2 applications sometimes are necessary. You can throw in an Avenue South for 2 applications, 2,4-D by itself or with Blindside. Celsius also with 2 applications generally does a pretty good job as well, like I just said, the Blindside. And so I suggest waiting, at least in my area, to early June, let that initial flush of germination to occur. Use a combination of one of these herbicides I was just mentioning. You'll probably have to have 2 applications, so plan to come back in a week or 2 with the second application. Then I would tank mix either Tower or Spectacle Flow at these rates to give you season-long or summer-long control. And so that strategies work very well for a lot of our lawn care operators. So again, wait until you get that flush of germination. It's going to take 2 applications just about with anything you use. With that second application, put in either Tower, 32 ounces per acre, or Spectacle Flow at 4.5 ounces per acre. And then that should give you season-long or summer-long control. So something to consider. And here's some just pictures of doing various of these things. Untreated upper left, lower right, Celsius, 2 applications. Again, we did not put in a pretty much herbicides, so the doveweed's starting to come back. Here's Speed Zone twice, very good control. Here's Speed Zone twice with the second one combined with Spectacle. So again, excellent control. And again, this was done in June, and these pictures really were taken in late September. And then the granular atrazine. Again, it's slow. The liquids doesn't work very well. Got to use a granular application or granular formulation, but we got very good results with it also. So I'm going to move on and address some sedge issues. Sedge control is another group of weeds that we're starting to get a lot of herbicide resistance to, as well as Kalinga species. Again, these particular plants generally can tolerate wet conditions better than turf grasses. And so obviously trying to dry out the turf, however you can do that, is a good IPM strategy. Going after control early is better. A lot of these sedges start to initiate nutlet production with the summer solstice, which of course is June 21st. And so if you can get these treated before that summer solstice, you could hopefully control the weed before nutlets are produced, and therefore you put a dent in future populations. As far as control, pretty much herbicides, here's how I rank them. There are not that many great options. If you have an annual sedge or annual clinga, you can get pretty good control with these 4 products. If you start switching over to a perennial sedge like purple nut sedge or yellow nut sedge or perennial or green clinga, then these products are not as consistent. And so this is how I rank them. And so again, if you're dealing with an annual sedge or annual clinga, you get pretty good control with these products. Purple nut sedge, yellow nut sedge, green clinga. The problem with those is you think they're dead by winter with heavy frosts, but they're not dead. They're just burnt down. And so they're still alive and don't need to germinate because, again, they are alive. And so these herbicides, you just missed the opportunity for control with a lot of these perennial plants. And so with that, I am going to complete my particular talk. I would add on post-emergent control of these sedges. One strategy I've started using the last couple of years is pick whatever nut sedge product you want to use, whether Certainty, Monument, Sedgehammer, Solero, Katana, or other products. Still use those, but tank mix in Basagram TNO or one of the sulfentrazone products. Again, the strategy here is to give 2 combination products with different modes of action. So again, tank mix either Basagram with one of your favorite previously used nut sedge product, and the next time you go out with that nut sedge product, instead of using Basagram, rotate to something with sulfentrazone in it. So again, that has worked a lot better for us trying to control some of these resistant biotypes that are out there, and will help delay resistance from occurring on your particular site. Okay, again, thanks everybody for listening on this presentation. Again, I'm Bert McCarty at Clemson University in Clemson, South Carolina. Here's my contact information, my email address, in case you got any questions you want to follow up on, or I'll be happy to answer any questions that I might have right now. So thank you so much.